Hey everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff, and welcome to another episode of Gideon Stuff Adventures. I am really excited for this one because we're going to be traveling to a really awesome national park. And you already know what it is. You've seen the title, you know what you're in for. Today, we're going to be talking all about Carlsbad Caverns. Carlsbad Caverns was New Mexico's very first national park, established in 1930, and it is probably one of the more famous or recognizable national parks in the entire country. I would bet money that if you were to ask a random person on the street to name 5 U.S. national parks, some of the most common answers would include Yellowstone, Yosemite, take your pick of any of the Utah parks, Zion, Arches, Canyonlands. One of those will probably be in there. Maybe the Grand Canyon and Carlsbad Caverns. I think those probably have a good shot of being named by most people. There's a lot of national parks. I'm sure there's some national parks that most of you don't know about. I'm sure you'd be shocked at how many national parks there are and how many you haven't heard of. Like Indiana Dunes National Park. Who's heard about that? And no, for you 3 people from Indiana watching, you don't count. You don't count. I'm sorry. All of that is just to say that Carlsbad Caverns is pretty famous, and for good reason. The Big Room, which is the largest cave of the cave system, is the largest underground cavern in North America, and the 32nd largest underground cavern in the world. The park itself consists of about 120 different caves, and there are new ones still being discovered and new areas still being explored to this day. I think most people assume that Carlsbad Caverns is the only cave system in the park, but it's not. Far from. It's not even the biggest, which is kind of interesting. It does have the largest room, again, the big room, but the total mileage of Carlsbad Caverns is about 32 miles of passageways. Meanwhile, the nearby Lechuguilla Cave, which is also in the park, has about 140 miles of passageways. That places both of these caves as, in the ranks of the world's largest cave systems, but Lechuguilla Cave is not accessible to the general public. It is a lot less developed, a lot harder to explore, and brings a lot more dangers and risks. Which brings up one of the really awesome things about Carlsbad Caverns, and one of the reasons why it is such a neat national park. Carlsbad Caverns preserves the largest, most beautiful, and easily accessible cave basically in the world. Very few places boast an area like this that almost anyone can just walk down into. Most of the time, you've got to be an experienced caver, you've got to be a spelunker, you've got to be willing to worm your way through crevasses and swim through underground springs to see beautiful caverns. But at Carlsbad Caverns National Park, you can take an elevator into the amazing caverns, and there's a really well-made trail system down there. You can walk down into the caverns, and there are some areas that are off limits, some areas that the general populace cannot go, but it is very easy for basically almost anyone to go down and experience a really otherworldly feature. When I first started making adventure videos, I wanted to make videos only about like unknown places or lesser known places. But eventually I decided to expand this series to include national parks, national monuments, state parks, national historic sites, things like that, because there's a reason these sites are parks and monuments and things. It's because they're really damn cool. And I want to share that with you guys, and I want to talk about that. I want to get my own 2 cents in on that. And Carlsbad Caverns is one of the places that I knew I had to make a video about because it is so popular, it is so famous, and it is supremely interesting. Now, it's an annoying sound. Now, I was kind of holding off on making a video about Carlsbad Caverns because I really, really wanted to go on some of the ranger guided tours into some of the rooms where you can't go unless you're going on a ranger guided tour. Some of the, I don't know, not lesser known rooms, but some of the cool rooms that feel a little more exclusive and stuff. And I haven't had the chance to do that. Just time hasn't worked out. Unfortunately, I have been to some of those rooms before when I was a child, when I was a little kid. Unfortunately, back then I was not an obnoxious YouTuber, so I didn't film anything that I can use in this video. But I did take a trip to Carlsbad Caverns back in June, and I just did the regular self-guided tour. And so that's the footage that you guys are going to see today. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, but primarily speleology, speleogenesis, cave formations, things like that. And Carlsbad Caverns is located in a part of New Mexico that I find to be incredibly fascinating. Carlsbad Caverns is located in the Guadalupe Mountains. The Guadalupe Mountains are a rather short mountain range, about 65 miles, that extend from southeastern New Mexico into the very northern portion of the West Texas Panhandle. And this small mountain range is really, really neat. It is, and I say this with no exaggeration or sarcasm, probably one of the coolest mountain ranges in the Southwest, maybe even in the entire United States. It's a really, really neat mountain range. And if you want further proof of how neat it is, it's home to 2 national parks, Carlsbad Caverns and Guadalupe Mountains National Park. Great name. I have already made a video about the Guadalupe Mountains, and that was my video on Hunter Peak, which was one of the mountains in the range, 6th highest point in Texas. And in that video, I talked mainly about the history of the Guadalupe Mountains National Park. And I'm not going to rehash much of that history here, but I do want to talk a little bit about the relationship of these 2 national parks, Carlsbad Caverns and Guadalupe, and how they relate to the geologic interest of the area. I think Guadalupe Mountains National Park is a criminally underrated national park. It is stunningly beautiful, hiking through McKittrick Canyon, hiking through the Tejas Trail, going to the Devil's Hall. It's a very, very beautiful area, and it's very different for Texas, right? Texas isn't necessarily known as a mountain state, but this little part of Texas is very, very interesting. And the Guadalupe Mountains as a whole are incredibly interesting, and they're incredibly important. I think one of the reasons why I enjoy Guadalupe Mountains National Park so much is because I have a geology background, and because the geologic history of this mountain range is incredibly fascinating. And I think sometimes if you're not into the science behind this, you might overlook a lot of the really, really interesting things going on with this particular national park. It doesn't have a lot of the same, instant attractions or appeal as some other parks, including Carlsbad Caverns. With Carlsbad Caverns, anyone can appreciate, oh my goodness, this is a huge underground cave with these magnificent cave formations. That's awesome. I want to see that. With Guadalupe Mountains, some people I've talked to are like, well, I didn't really like it out there. It's just mountains in the desert. It's because they probably didn't appreciate what was going on and why this small mountain range is so freaking awesome. Carlsbad Caverns was established as a national park in 1930, as I've already mentioned. New Mexico's first national park, and New Mexico didn't get another national park until 2019, when White Sands was upgraded from a national monument to a national park. New Mexico has a ton of national monuments, and I'm not sure why some of them have not been upgraded to national parks yet. I'm being completely honest. The fact that New Mexico only has 2 national parks is really weird to me. I feel like it deserves a lot more, especially considering some of the other things that have been made into national parks over the course of United States history. But that's a topic for another time. Guadalupe Mountains National Park didn't become a national park until the 1970s. And during the whole process of trying to turn what was then a state park into a national park, as part of that process, the conversation was brought up that, well, maybe we should just extend Carlsbad Caverns National Park into the Guadalupes of Texas. Carlsbad Caverns National Park at that point already had a couple of different areas. You had the Carlsbad Cavern area itself. You had Rattlesnake Springs, Slaughter Canyon. You had like a Lechuguilla Cave. All these different little areas. And they considered, well, maybe we should just push it south into Texas. And I gotta be honest, part of me thinks that combining Guadalupe Mountains National Park and Carlsbad Caverns National Park into one national park would be really, really awesome. We'd call that national park the Capitan Reef National Park. And there's a couple reasons why I think this would be really cool. Number one, there is a national park in Utah called Capitan Reef. And it's beautiful. It's a good drive. It's not my favorite national park. And one of the reasons is because it has nothing to do with reefs. Capitan Reef National Park is named for these big dome-like white sandstone formations of the Navajo sandstone that early explorers out there thought reminded them of the Capitol building. And then there's some other features out there that explorers and naturalists thought reminded them of like waves on a reef. The actual geology of the park is mostly terrestrial sediments, Aeolian windblown sand dunes, and dry flats and riverlands. But the United States has 2 national parks devoted to reef geology already. And that's Carlsbad Caverns and Guadalupe Mountains. So if you were to combine these 2 parks into one bigger park called Capitan Reef National Park, bam, you've got a really, really awesome national park preserving some of the best reef sediments anywhere in the world. Now, this will never happen because Capitan Reef National Park and Capital Reef National Park sound too similar. And honestly, I think it's good that Texas and New Mexico, have their own separate little parks in this area. But man, part of me, I mean, the 2 parks border each other. Carlsbad, not sure what that was out there. Also, sorry about the reflection in my sunglasses, or my regular glasses, if that bothers you. I guess I could take them off, but then I can't see, so they stay on. The border between New Mexico and Texas is the southern boundary for Carlsbad Caverns National Park and the northern boundary for Guadalupe Mountains National Park. Again, it's good for each state to have their own park, but part of me really, really thinks it'd be so awesome if they were one big park called Capitan Reef National Park. I'm going to touch on the Capitan Reef fairly briefly. As I already mentioned, I am fascinated with this part of New Mexico, the Permian Basin. And I am working on another video about the Permian Basin as a whole, as well as a video that I'm currently working on editing about Guadalupe Peak, the highest point in Texas. And those videos, we will focus more on the reef itself. For this video about Carlsbad Caverns, we're going to talk mainly about speleogenesis and the formation of the caves themselves. But that story does start about 265 million years ago in the middle Permian. I take that back. I guess our story really starts about 300 million years ago. Around that time, North America and South America smashed together, and this tectonic event caused a lot of really interesting things to happen. The most important structural event that we can see preserved in Paleozoic sediments throughout New Mexico and West Texas is the ancestral Rocky Mountains. This is the name given to this mountain building event that built very, very high mountains in what is now northern New Mexico and extending north from there. With any mountain building event, you have areas that are being compressed and pushed up, and you've also got areas that are being lowered and depressed. You've got some extension going on. And two of these depressed areas were the Delaware Basin and the Midlands Basin. The Delaware Basin covered what is now West Texas and up into southeastern New Mexico, and the Midland Basin existed a little bit to the east, more in Texas. During this whole time, New Mexico was at the very southern edge of the North American craton, and Texas would have been out in the ocean submerged. New Mexico was a huge continental shelf. The continental shelf is the part of the continent that basically extends out under the ocean, but is still part of the continental crust. It's not oceanic crust. And this continental shelf would change as sea levels rose and fell. Sometimes it extended as far north as northern New Mexico up in the Sangre de Cristos. We can see deposition of limestones and stuff from periods where the ocean was higher. And sometimes it was much closer to the southern terminus of the state. About 270 million years ago, we had a huge shelf of limestone being deposited. That is today the San Andres limestones and dolomites. And this was kind of sitting between the Delaware Basin and the Midlands Basin. As time went on, sediment pouring off of the continent began to fill up the Midlands Basin. And if we look at the rock record today, we can see that by about 265 million years ago or so, the Midland Basin had been completely filled with sediment. The Delaware Basin was starting to fill. The Delaware Basin would eventually become filled with terrestrial sediments as well as a lot of evaporites as the continent continued to uplift, as ocean levels decreased, and what was left of the oceans began to evaporate. And we'll talk about all of that more in other videos, but the key takeaway is that this part of New Mexico and Texas is absolutely just packed with Paleozoic sedimentary rocks. These sequences are up to 17,000 feet thick in some places. Not all of that is well exposed, though. If we go out towards the Llano Estacado, I've talked about this in my Blackwater Draw video. We know that the Ogallala Formation, a lot of fluvial and alluvial sediments coming off the Rocky Mountains now cover a lot of these Paleozoic strata, but taking drill cores reveals how much is down there. Now again, about 265 million years ago, the Delaware Basin was a deeper ocean basin, and between it and the continent was a reef. So what is a reef? A reef is any kind of structure that rises from the ocean floor. There are man-made reefs. There are reefs that are created by waves, making sandbars and stuff. The most common type of reef, and probably the one that everyone's familiar with, is a coral reef, where you have huge colonies of coral, which are animals, that build these big masses from the ocean floor upwards. And that is kind of the type of reef that we're talking about when we're talking about this ancient reef system. Except, back then, the kinds of coral that make coral reefs today hadn't evolved yet. And so the animals that constructed this reef were sponges and bryozoans and mollusks and brachiopods and microbes and other animals, algae, other critters like that were forming these huge communities. And as they died, their calcium carbonate rich skeletons would settle to the sea floor and would just build up and build up and build up into these huge mounds of skeletal remains that would become limestone in the future. And we call this reef the Capitan Reef, named for El Capitan, a very prominent cliff that sits just under Guadalupe Peak. And holy cow, the sweatification has begun. Again, I've got my air conditioner turned off because it's very, very loud, and I'll be a sweaty boy by the end of this recording. I am really kind of brushing over a lot of really cool geology because, again, I'm going to cover this in later videos in much greater depth. What we need to know for now is that the rock strata that make up Carlsbad Caverns is primarily limestone, thick sequences of limestone deposited in the back reef of the Capitan Reef system. And we're going to leave it at that. We're not going to talk about the anatomy of a reef, forereef, back reef, lagoons, all of that. We're going to save that for another video because I want to focus on cave forming.
All right, well, here we are at the Caverns. There are a ton of people here, because there always are. I have not been here in years, since I was a kid, which is crazy, living down here in southern New Mexico this long. She was here not too long ago, back in October.
Petroleum systems.
Petroleum systems. Yeah, we'll talk a lot about petroleum systems in this video. Out there is El Capitan. That's Guadalupe National Monument. Ha 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 ha, so funny. We're here at the foot, kind of the northern end of the Guadalupe Mountains. Lots of limestone geology because it's the Permian Basin. Maybe so. We are shocked and disgusted. Janelle just pointed out this gastropod fossil they have here is actually a brachiopod. You need to tell someone about that. You need to get on that. Ooh, look at that calcite. Dogtooth calcite. Dogtooth spar. Cave pearls. And so it begins. The descent into the cave. Will we make it back? No one knows. No one knows. Yeah, that's cool.
So tasty. Oh, there's one.
They will?
Wow.
Imagine getting this far and you see the cavern closed door.
Entering Carlsbad Caverns through the natural entrance is a really neat experience. You walk down this winding path into this huge gaping maw of a mouth. And as you're walking, you're starting in the Tanzel Formation, which is up top. This is one of our younger formations out here. And you walk down through the Yates Formation and down into like the big room and places where we're going to be focusing mostly. You are in the Capitan Formation, which is one of the main reef formations of this area. Because the Guadalupe Mountains are made of limestone, you would assume that caves are going to be very, very common. And you'd be correct. In my video about Sandia Cave and a couple of other videos where I've talked about caves, we've talked about carbonation erosion and how carbonic acid in water flowing through limestone formations. Where was I going with that sentence? Limestone is very susceptible to erosion via carbonic acid that is transported by most groundwater. You might think that that's how Carlsbad Caverns formed. It would seem intuitive. But you'd be wrong. Carbonation erosion did not form Carlsbad Caverns. There is a really famous cave in the US that was formed via carbonation erosion. That's Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. And there are lots of caves all over the world that are limestone caves formed by carbonation erosion. Again, this is an effective way to erode a cave. But these caves are what we call epigene caves, meaning that the acid, the carbonic acid, is coming from above the cave. It's coming from the overlying soil. That's where the water is picking up the corrosive elements, and this is draining into the landscape and hollowing out these caves. We call this landscape karst topography. And typically these caves are connected to the surface via openings like sinkholes or other fissures. But Carlsbad Caverns isn't like that. When you walk into the main entrance, you're starting at the visitor center, which is on top of a ridge along the eastern escarpment of the Guadalupes. You're not really walking in through a, dish-shaped sinkhole in the ground. You're entering the cave through a ridge, a high point. It's not really a karst feature. The caves are related to karst topography, but this is not a karst feature to get into the cave. The other thing is that even though there are lots of carbonation eroded limestone caves in New Mexico, here in the Guadalupes, there's not a whole lot of available groundwater. There's not a lot of precipitation. We're in the Chihuahuan Desert. You really just don't have that much water to make a whole lot of carbonic acid to hollow out some of the largest caves in the world. You would expect this to happen in a much wetter environment. So, if carbonation erosion isn't responsible for Carlsbad Caverns, then what is? Well, it is a kind of chemical dissolution erosion, but it's not carbonic acid. It's sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is nasty, nasty stuff. It's definitely capable of eating and eroding limestone. But why do we think that sulfuric acid formed Carlsbad Caverns? This was not proposed until the 1970s. To be completely honest, most people were kind of puzzled about a lot of things about Carlsbad Caverns up to this point. One of those things was the presence of so much gypsum. Now, this was a little bit odd, but people were explaining it because, well, a lot of the rocks in the area did already have gypsum. Gypsum is a common evaporite mineral associated with ancient reef sediments. So it's not that weird. But a lot of the gypsum in Carlsbad Caverns is remobilized or more recently precipitated gypsum. And that was a little bit weird for people. So let me show you where hydrogen or where sulfuric acid comes into play. That's right, it's whiteboard time, and I just got new dry erase markers. So we're going to break into some of these. What color do I want? Let's see, what's on top? They're double-sided. Brown and black? No, not today. We want colors. What's next? Blue and like teal, other blue? I don't know. We'll use this. This will be fine. So, gosh, I love it when it's whiteboard time. Let's go ahead and scoot this back a little ways so that I can draw better and so that you guys can see a little bit more of what I am doing. So, oh, that's one thing I don't like about this. Oh, suck. You can't put the lid on the end of the marker. They do have magnets though. So I can just throw that right there. I think that'll work. So sulfuric acid is a strong acid. It's an acid, which I'm sure you would be absolutely shocked to know. And actually, when sulfuric acid reacts with calcium carbonate, which, again, if you remember, is the primary chemical component of limestone, it has a very interesting reaction. So let's go ahead and write this down. I really need to get my whiteboard actually hung on my wall so I can write as you. I mean, I could write like this, I guess. You know, just put my back up against the wall. And this looks natural. Right? This is comfy. This is a good way to do this. You guys are gonna learn so much. I'm not even sure if you guys can even see from here, but anyways, H2SO4. That is our sulfuric acid plus our calcium carbonate, CaCO3. That's our limestone. Yeah, we're not doing this. We're not doing that. Not gonna work. I'll just write like this. It'll be a surprise for you guys until I decide to lift the whiteboard up and show you exactly what I've got going on. There's actually one more ingredient in this soup that I forgot. I didn't really forget. I just haven't written it yet. But water. So we have a reaction of sulfuric acid, calcium carbonate, and water. All right, calcium carbonate you get from the rocks making up the cave. The water you get from wherever. Water is pretty common. And your end product, I should have written this smaller. It's okay. Planning ahead is not my strong suit. Ew. I also need to get an eraser because look at that smudge. Look at that smudge. Or I just don't make mistakes anymore. See that? You know, I gotta be bit. Wait. There's an eraser on the end of the lid. Ah ha ha ha! That works a lot better than my greasy ass little finger. We're learning things every day, guys. Every day. Look, I've never claimed to be a smart person, so forgive my stupidity. It is stupid. 2H2O plus CO2. Bam! There is our reaction. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me try to explain a little bit. Probably should talk over the board. So this right here is ours. It's fun looking at this in the camera because it's all backwards. So this right here is our sulfuric acid. This is our limestone, and here's some water. You add these three ingredients together and you get this plus this. This right here is gypsum. I wrote that upside down. That's not too bad. And then, of course, CO2 here is our carbon dioxide gas. Oh, and by the way, this whole thing here, this gypsum, this is calcium sulfate dihydrate. Gypsum is it's a calcium sulfate. It's a hydrous calcium sulfate mineral. Hydrous minerals are minerals that have water as a major part of their chemical structure. So, fun fact. Son of a bitch. You know what? That little eraser actually, no, this, that is still very, very smudgy. Look at that. That, you know what? I don't like this teal color anymore. It has disappointed me. We're going to just use the regular ass blue. Regular ass blue to the rescue. All right, so that chemical reaction right there explains the presence of all the gypsum in Carlsbad Caverns. That gives us a really neat little idea about, sulfuric acid erosion, right? That's cool. But where is that sulfuric acid coming from? Well, it all starts with a gas, hydrogen sulfide. That's water. That's water that I just wrote. Oh yeah, that blue erases a lot better. I just wanted to test the marker, and because it's blue, I thought water was the way to go on that. Anyways, hydrogen sulfide. This is the gas that we're wanting to be talking about. This is called the rotten egg gas. You know, that sulfury smell that people love. Yeah, hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is very, very commonly associated with underground petroleum deposits. These are obviously petroleum deposits deep below the surface. Where I was going with that is that the underground part is important because typically these are anoxic environments. These are places where there is very little to no oxygen. And that's important because hydrogen sulfide reacts violently with oxygen. So you need to build up a lot of hydrogen sulfide somewhere where there's not a lot of oxygen. But then that hydrogen sulfide can leak upwards to somewhere where there is a lot of oxygen. This can be somewhere where it gets to the surface, or this can be where it gets to water, or water gets to it. So if we actually look at the reaction of hydrogen sulfide with oxygen, what do we get? And again, we're not going to be doing that angle. I'm so sorry. I just can't sit like that forever. There's two different reaction series that we can have. Hydrogen sulfide plus oxygen gives us H2SO4. First of all, H2SO4. Does that look familiar? I said I was going to do this again, but I am. Does that look familiar? It should because... Wait a second. What? Oh, shit. Balance your equations, guys. Balance your chemical equations. That's a 2, by the way. Not a... I know, my handwriting is illegible. 2. Okay, there we go. We've got a balanced chemical equation now. But anyways, this should look familiar because this is, guess what? That's right, our sulfuric acid. That is one of the things that you make when you mix hydrogen sulfide with oxygen. And the other one isn't as important, but we'll go over it anyways. Hydrogen sulfide plus oxygen gives us 2 sulfurs and 2 H2Os. Let's see here. My goodness, you can't even read this shit. That's okay. So here's our second reaction. Hydrogen sulfide plus oxygen gives us, this is a 2, this is an S, and this little symbol here it means elemental. So this is like elemental sulfur, your yellowy powder, and water. So these are our 2 different reactions here. We can form, I guess it's good that I went over both of them. So when hydrogen sulfide interacts with oxygen, you get sulfuric acid and you get elemental sulfur and water. And that's how we make sulfuric acid. Anyways, the Permian Basin is home to a lot of vast petroleum deposits. In fact, New Mexico has produced over 6 billion barrels of oil, and a lot of it, like more than 90% of it, has come from the Permian Basin. So there is a lot of petroleum in these rock layers, and that petroleum is producing hydrogen sulfide. And that hydrogen sulfide is interacting with oxygen. Where? Well, that hydrogen sulfide is moving up through the strata until it hits groundwater, or until it hits like aquifers. Now, the main theory about the erosion of Carlsbad Caverns right now is that hydrogen sulfide rising up from underground petroleum reservoirs mixed with the water table to form sulfuric acid. And the sulfuric acid then started reacting with the limestone host rock, carving out these massive caves, depositing gypsum. Okay, but when did all this start happening? Well, dating of a mineral called allanite in Carlsbad Caverns has showed that the main passageways of the caverns are between 6 and 4 million years old. So it seems like the caves have formed in that time. And I don't think we're going to go over the formation of allanite. We could. It's really interesting, but for the sake of time, I think we'll skip over it for today. But dating of that mineral has showed us these ages. And interestingly enough, these ages are progressive. The oldest caves are the ones near the top, and the younger caves are on the lower level. So the big room, kind of the main touristy part of Carlsbad Caverns, and an area called Left Hand Tunnel, which sit kind of in the middle, are about 5 million years old. And meanwhile, the main corridor, the thing that you walk down to the bigger rooms at the very top, is about 6 million years old. And at the very, very bottom, the lower cave areas are about 4 million years old. This also helps support the water table theory. And let me show you how. Oh, shit. What? Erase. Gosh, that's horrible. We're going to use the brown and black marker. I said we weren't going to, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I need you to draw pictures. Okay, so right here I have a very rough and not to scale and super inaccurate drawing of Carlsbad Caverns, but it will suffice for what I want to show right now. Do I really? Stay. So, presently, gosh dang it. You know what? I should have just drawn the whole picture. Should have just drawn the whole picture before trying to do this. We'll just draw the whole picture. All right, so here is the finished drawing, and we'll do this. There we go. Okay, so what do these dashed lines with numbers represent? Well, these represent the position of the water table at different times throughout the history of the Guadalupe Mountains. So remember, these are mountains that are being uplifted. And even as recently as 4 million years ago, they're still rising. And a lot of this is because of the Rio Grande Rift, we're not going to talk about that because I talk about it a lot on this channel. But these mountains are being uplifted. And so consider this. So let's look at these elevations real quick. This bottom line, this is at 3,150 feet. This is the current position of the water table as we see it today. This is a number taken from near Lechuguilla Cave. This is 3,300 feet. This is 3,600 feet. This is 4,200 feet up here. My little version of the cavern right here, we have the lower caverns. We've got the big room, and then this is the main corridor up here. What each of these different layers show is where the water table sat at times in the past. And I guess I could probably also mark these with ages. So this one here, this is the present. This here is going to be about 4 million years ago, 5 million years ago, and 6 million years ago. And yes, even though Carlsbad Caverns are a huge underground cave system, they are still many thousands of feet above sea level. So, 6 million years ago, the water table sat at an elevation of what is today 42,000 feet. This is where we see the main corridor. So we've got these rocks that have the water table sitting in them, and hydrogen sulfide from lower petroleum deposits seeps its way upwards, hits the water table, and starts creating sulfuric acid. And the sulfuric acid starts to eat the walls of the limestone, forming these huge caves. But remember, the mountain is still uplifting. So we've got the water table here, and let's say that this is the present day water table is at 3,150 feet. Let's say that in the past it was also at 3,100 feet above sea level. But then the mountain gets pushed up. And so the water table isn't changing. The water table is staying here, but the mountain is moving up. So now those caves that were eroded before are up here, and we have a new level of the water table. More hydrogen sulfide is leaking in. We're creating more acid. We're eroding even more. The mountain gets uplifted a little bit higher. And now we're forming the lower caverns. Does that make sense? The water table is staying more or less in the same place, but as the mountains are being pushed up, that water is reacting with our hydrogen sulfide to create sulfuric acid, and that sulfuric acid is eating the rocks around it. And as the mountains move, the erosion and the rocks that are being eaten away change slightly. Now that's all really freaking awesome, if you ask me. But there's even more evidence supporting the theory that Carlsbad Caverns was formed by sulfuric acid erosion. And a lot of that evidence comes from the gypsum itself. Some of this gypsum is actually replacing the limestone, meaning that the gypsum was being deposited as the limestone was being eroded. Remember, gypsum is a byproduct of sulfuric acid eating limestone and mixing with water. Some places we even have the gypsum replacing the shape of fossils that are in the limestone. So this is really, really good evidence that, again, as the limestone is being eaten away, gypsum is being deposited right alongside it. We also see massive blocks of gypsum lying all over the floor of the big room. This gypsum probably fell off of the ceiling. As the sulfuric acid starts to eat away at the walls and the ceiling, it's depositing a layer of gypsum. And a lot of times this gypsum just falls off the ceiling eventually onto the floor, where it can recrystallize or just stack up into these big piles and accumulations. And holy crap, these erasers suck. Look at that. That's awful. That's disgusting. We have to go get like a wipe or something. Another piece of evidence supporting the sulfuric acid erosion hypothesis is spongework. If you look at the walls of Carlsbad Cavern, sometimes you'll see like these really like kind of swirly or pitted patterns in the rock. Well, this forms when excess hydrogen sulfide is floating around the cavern, and it bonds with water droplets on the walls and the ceiling. And And of course, we get more sulfuric acid, and so it starts to kind of dissolve and eat away at the rock in more of a pockmark kind of pattern, leaving behind all the weird, intricate sponge work that we see today. So all of this taken together makes it very, very likely that Carlsbad Caverns was formed via sulfuric acid erosion. I'm going to bring up a word that I mentioned earlier, epigene. Remember epigene caves? These are caves that are associated with karst topography where the carbonic acid is coming from above the cave. The formation of Carlsbad Caverns via sulfuric acid is what we call a hypogene cave, meaning the acid is coming from underneath. And again, the general formation of Carlsbad Caverns, the way that it's positioned, the fact that you enter it through the top of a ridge instead of a karst, that is also evidence in favor of a hypogene sulfuric acid event. And also the process of cave forming is called speleogenesis. I'm not sure if I mentioned that yet, but that's a fun word. I like that word. One of the first geologists that proposed that Carlsbad Caverns was a hypogene cave instead of an epigene cave was J. Harlan Brett, a very famous geologist. And his actual first name was J. Just the letter J. Like, that's not an abbreviation. That's not an abbreviation of his first name. His first name was just J. The letter J. I wonder if he had 25 siblings and his parents were just like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, blah, blah, blah. I hope not. That'd be an awful household to grow up in, but I'm not sure his parents were thinking with that name. I also want to quickly mention the importance of microorganisms in cave formation. I am not as versed on microgeoorganic biology. I don't even know what you call. There's got to be a word for that. Geomicrobiology. Anyways, chemosynthesis and other processes related to microorganisms like bacteria are very, very important in cave formation, and they shouldn't be overlooked. Again, I can't speak all that knowledgeably on their processes, but I do want you to keep the importance of microbiomes in your mind for a story that I'm going to tell later on in the video. I do want to briefly mention snotties, though. These are biofilms. These are like little accumulations of microorganisms that form on the cave walls in highly acidic environments. Some of these sulfur rich environments can be like 0 to 1 pH, which is like, that's pretty dang acidic, my friend. These organisms are adapted to live in these really, really hazardous conditions. And that's a good transition into the fact that, okay, Carlsbad Caverns was formed via erosion from sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is super nasty. Sulfuric fumes are incredibly deadly. Why on earth are we letting people down into these caves? Well, it's because those processes are no longer active in Carlsbad Caverns. In fact, Carlsbad Caverns is what we call a fossil cave. And not just because its walls do contain fossils of brachiopods and gastropods and other animals that would have existed during the time of the Capitan Reef, but because the cave is no longer being carved out or shaped by those original processes that first formed it. There is no more sulfuric acid and hydrogen sulfide running through this system. Instead, the cave is now starting to resemble a more typical karst cave. And we can look at this in its speleothems. Speleothems are stalactites, stalagmites, flowstone, a myriad of other cave features formed from calcium carbonate, or other carbonate minerals sometimes, but in case of Carlsbad Caverns, it's calcium carbonate. So now we can see carbonation erosion is working on the cave. It's dissolving some of the limestone and it's dripping off the ceiling, and this dripping process is depositing some calcite up there. We're forming stalactites. When it hits the ground, it starts to build up. We're forming stalagmites, and again, many, many other different formations.
The black hole. Your mom's been here. Oh, hell yeah, let's go swimming.
Yeah, they could get a couple days.
About squish one of them little fuckers into jelly. That's beautiful. Let's do a detour. Let's go up that way. Gorgeous. Actually, no, we're going to light out for just a little bit. Oh, light art filled, of course. try to look down through this big old whopping hole. Yes. Oh, it's stunning. I made a sculpture of you.
Pretty much all of the stalactites and stalagmites in Carlsbad Caverns formed after the caves had formed. And they really don't have anything to do with the actual speleogenesis. These are much later secondary forms. A lot of the stalactites in Carlsbad Caverns date to about 800 to 900,000 years old. These are some of the oldest ones. So the sulfuric acid carved out the huge openings, and then later carbonic acid from the surface began depositing calcite within the cavities. And we've already talked about the carbonation, erosion, you know what? We'll go over it again here, because why not? Why not? I want to use my whiteboard. I hope you guys like chemistry, because today we're going to be doing a lot of geochemistry. Actually, this is going to be the last little bit of geochem that we do. We should do more geochem in some of these videos. I need to make a video. I've thought about, I make a lot of videos where I mention radiometric dating, but I've never I did go through the decay rate of C14 in my Sandia Man video. But I should find a video where it's a good excuse to go over like uranium, lead, uranium, thorium, lead, argon, rubidium, strontium, potassium, all the different kinds of radiometric dating. I should find an excuse to make a video about that. We'll do a lot of decay rate math and stuff. It'll be great. It'll be fun. I promise. Okay, so anyways, we're gonna start with our formation of carbonic acid, and of course this is H2O, water, and I did mean to write H2O this time, plus carbon dioxide, CO2, gives us, I don't know why I keep trying to make this position work. Like, I know it's not going to work. I'm like stabbing myself in the stomach. Look at this. Look at this. I'm like stabbing myself in the ribs and the stomach with the sharp end of the board here, but for some reason I keep trying to make this work. I think this is, this feels very natural. This feels like I'm talking right to you guys. I'm writing, I'm talking, but this isn't going to work. And also my arms are not that long. I can't get all the way over here. So this is, I don't know why I keep trying this. Probably because I'm insane. Trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. I am literally showing you guys the definition of insanity as we speak, which is just freaking awesome. But anyways, this is going to give us H2CO3, and that is carbonic acid, of course. You know what? We're going to stay like this. You're going to be like, no, Gideon, didn't you learn your lesson? I should have. At this point, it's punishment. And man, I really don't like these erasers. So anyways, we mix our water with carbon dioxide, and this can happen in atmosphere. So, water droplets in the atmosphere mixing with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can cause carbonic rain to fall. This is a very lightly acidic rain. This can happen in the soil. If you have soils that are being eroded from calcium carbonate rich rocks, that soil is going to have a lot of CO2 in it. Soil in general just has a lot of CO2 in it, I guess. I'm not sure why I tried to give that big explanation, but you can mix just rainwater with CO2 in the soil and form this acid, and then this acid eventually starts seeping into the ground. It starts hitting our limestone rock formations. It's leaking through the ceiling of Carlsbad caverns, and it's eating the limestone. And that equation looks like this. CaCO3, remember this is calcium carbonate, this is our limestone, that's what limestone is made up of, plus H2CO3, our carbonic acid, is going to give us water and bicarbonate. So, again, I can't even reach over here. Guys, I don't know why I'm doing this. I do. It's because I'm dumb. But that's okay. That's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. Yeah, fine. I give up. I give up. You win, board. You win. Whatever. You know what? I don't actually care. Okay, so this right here is our bicarbonate, also called our hydrogen carbonate. And you know what? I forgot. We need to add our, this is a minus, and this is 2 plus. All right, so there we go. Now we formed our bicarbonate. This is our process of dissolution. This is our dissolving of the limestone. And now we are going to start precipitating our speleothems. And this is going to be a longer equation, so I'm going to have to actually take a little break. So we're going to take our back part, and also, I guess I probably should have written this first. It doesn't really matter which way you write them, but just so you can see the progression of this plus this gave us this, and then you have this plus this gives us this, and now I'm going to take this and add it to, well, not really add it to anything, but you'll see. Okay, so we got our Ca2 plus our 2. This is going to be a like an evaporation, or basically the solution that we have here is going to begin to degas. So the carbon dioxide is going to start to try to leave the solution, and that leads to the precipitation of our speleothems. So we're going to be getting some CaCO3 again, and we're going to get some carbon dioxide, and we're going to get some water. It looks a little something like that. And you'll notice that I wrote this arrow both ways. So yeah, as you can see here, this is a yeah, take a closer look at that. There you go. This is a process that can kind of bounce back and forth. So you'll see, what did we make here? We made our calcium carbonate again. Bam, bam, bam. Stalactites, stalagmites are made out of calcite, calcium carbonate. So there we go. This right here is our speleothems. And then we're releasing carbon dioxide. That's going to escape and try and get back into the atmosphere. And we're releasing water, which is going to kind of sit on the cave floor. That's why you'll see water in caves. But the reason why this chemical process can go both ways is because look what we have. We have H2O and CO2 as byproducts. This takes us back to here. So this whole thing is kind of a beautiful chain where we're depositing calcite, forming carbonic acid, dissolving more limestone, depositing more calcite, and it's just a big cycle. So we've ended where we began, which is pretty cool. And so that's the history of the formation of Carlsbad caverns. The caverns themselves were hollowed out by sulfuric acid eating away at the Capitan Formation limestones. And then the amazing speleothems that fill the caverns now were deposited later through more typical carbonation cave processes. It's really, really cool.
Wow. This is nice. Just me for a second with the echoes. See where the heck Janelle got to. Oh, there she is. Ah, there she is. We caught up to the mongrel. Oh, wow. Why, you don't like the light? Makes it easier to see. Oh, was it bad for your photo? Oh, that's gorgeous. You're getting much better pictures than I am. You're going to have to send me some of those. I could live down here. I could live down here. Oh, that's gorgeous. Bunch of flowstone. Silent Bill. Yeah, it's a good one.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the history of discovery of Carlsbad Caverns. Now, the caverns themselves were known about by indigenous people groups since forever, probably. They did not extensively use the caverns, especially not the lower parts. There are a lot of archaeological sites around the Guadalupe Mountains, including sites dating back to the Folsom and Clovis cultures. But in the caverns themselves, most of the early human artifacts are relegated to the very, like just the natural entrance, basically. It wasn't until 1898 when a teenager named Jim White was the first person to extensively explore the caverns. And I have got to give this kid huge, huge props. In the 1980s, an inscription that said J. White 98 was found way, way in the depths of the cavern. And it was, I mean, Jim White had like told people that he'd gone really, really far in there. I think a lot of people are just kind of like, okay, yeah, right. You know, you found it, but you probably didn't explore that much. Yeah, he did. He did. He explored a lot of this cavern. This is in 1898. This is before New Mexico has gained statehood. Jim White was working for a cattle ranch at the time. Interestingly, when he was 10 years old, he told his dad, I want to be a cowboy. He didn't like school. He wanted to be a cowboy. So his dad said, all right. And at 10 years old, shipped him off to New Mexico territory. They lived in Texas, but he sent him off to New Mexico territory to work for the Lucas Ranch. And he worked there for most of his childhood and early adulthood. Anyways, when in the summer of 98, he was riding through the Chihuahuan Desert looking for stray cattle. And out in the distance, he saw this huge black plume rising out of the ground like a volcanic eruption. And he went over there, and it was bats. And he was shocked. He knew that there just had to be, I mean, gosh, if there was these many bats coming out of this hole in the ground, there had to be something neat down there. So later he returned, and he brought with him a hatchet and some fencing wire and some rope and a lantern. And he made himself a wire ladder using sticks that he hacked off of shrubs in the area. He made this ladder, and he lowered himself into the cave. And he explored it until his light went out, his kerosene lamp. And his kerosene lamp went out in what's called the Queen's Room, I believe. And he sat in pitch black, in total darkness, for half an hour or more before he got his lamp refilled from his spare canteen and relit. That's scary. This was a 15 or 16-year-old kid at the time, right? All alone, 800 feet underground in total darkness. It took some balls. I mean, this kid had cojones going down in there, right? And this is one of the reasons why it was difficult for early people to explore the cave. Just getting light down there was a huge, huge obstacle, and honestly, they didn't really need anything down there. But later, he would come back with other people over the years, and he was a huge proponent of the preservation of this cave. Interestingly enough, not many people believed Jim White when he told them his story about this amazing cave. People in the area knew about the Bat Cave, but no one had ever really gone down in there because, again, why? It's the 1890s. We've got other things to worry about. One person that did believe Jim was someone that Jim just referred to in his writings, and everyone just kind of referred to as the Kid, who was about a 15-year-old Mexican boy who would work with the cowboys, and I guess no one really knew his name. But he and Jim would explore the caverns together, and they made a lot of different trails. In the early 1900s, Jim helped a company start mining guano out of the Bat Cave, which is towards the top of Carlsbad Caverns. And they would mine guano out of here for many, many years. Made a good amount of money. Bat guano is used as fertilizer. A lot of this stuff was shipped off to California to use it in the fields. They made a good amount of money. And during that time, Jim would actually take people on guided tours of the caves by putting them in the guano bucket. They had this big bucket that they would lower into the cave, load up with bat shit, and then bring it out of the cave and unload the poop. And on the weekends, I guess, Jim would take people and he'd put them in the bat shit bucket and he'd lower them into the cave and he'd go with them and he'd guide them through the tunnels on trails that he had made himself. I wonder if that's where the term like batshit crazy comes from. You know what? I'm actually going to look that up real quick. Okay, it appears that there is no link between Jim White and the term batshit crazy. It didn't appear until the 1970s, so my bad. Anyways, in the 1920s, Jim took a photographer down there. The photographer took a lot of photos. And then people started to kind of believe his tales about amazing rock formations at the bottom of this cave. And in I think 1927, let me check my source, 1922, Jim took a group of 13 businessmen into the cave to prove that he wasn't lying. Interestingly, Jim would charge $2 to take people down to the caves, but he would regularly take people down for free. Like, he always took reporters down for free so that they could spread the word. And if someone wanted to go down in there, but they didn't have $2, he would just take them down for free anyways. So, that's awesome. In 1923, a guy named Robert Hawley, who was a mineral inspector or mineral examiner at the General Land Office, was sent to verify claims about Carlsbad Caverns. And he was kind of calling BS on Jim. Well, Jim took him down there, and Robert changed his mind real quick. He had this to say. And remember, this was a guy who was skeptical of Jim's claims until Jim took him down. I am wholly conscious of the feebleness of my efforts to convey in words the deep conflicting emotions, the feeling of fear and awe, and a desire for an inspired understanding of the divine Creator's work, which presents to the human eye such a complex aggregate of natural wonders in such a space. That is a man who has been thoroughly rebuked. Later on, in October of 1923, President Calvin Coolidge, Calvin Coolidge, the king of the Cabbage Patch Kids, established Carlsbad Caverns as a national monument, and Jim White was hired on as a tour guide, which is cool. When the government took over management of Carlsbad Caverns, there was an agreement struck that Jim would be hired on as chief explorer of the caverns, but no position like that existed in the Park Service, so he never got it. Which is kind of weird that the government would be like, yeah, you know what, we agree to that, and then be like, well, since there's no position, we'll just hope he forgot about that. You know, government doing government things. Jim and the park superintendent, a guy named Thomas Bowles, petitioned for the government to create the job post of chief explorer to give White so that he could keep doing what he loved, exploring the caverns, finding new rooms, finding new passageways. But it got shot down. Jim was allowed to sell his story in a little booklet at the park for 75 cents. And again, he was kind of a tour guide, but he wasn't really satisfied with that. Jim would again apply for the position of chief explorer in 1929, and this time he had a petition signed by a New Mexico governor and a lot of other influential New Mexicans and West Texans. And I want to read a little bit from that petition. An editorial in the El Paso Times on September 28th, 1929, encouraged the director of national parks to, quote, liberate Mr. White from the routine of guiding and permit him to devote his time and strength to the job for which he is best fitted, exploring the still unknown depths and recesses of that mighty underworld. Jim was once again denied and did not get that job. And then, in 1930, the monument became a national park, and Jim did not get to become a chief explorer because that's not a thing that existed. But that's the story of Jim White and Carlsbad Caverns. I want to end today's video with a story that serves as a warning. Carlsbad Caverns is an amazing place. It's a beautiful place, and it's something that as American citizens we should all be proud to own and protect. And we should protect it. Environments like we see in Carlsbad Caverns are rare. These ecosystems are fragile and delicate, and they can be destroyed or upended at the smallest thing. In the summer of 2023, a tourist in Carlsbad Caverns dropped a half-eaten bag of Cheetos somewhere in the cave. The bag was eventually recovered by park employees, and the mess was cleaned up. But the park had some harsh words for the person that left that little bag. A spilled bag may seem small, but to the life of the cave, it can be world-changing. Even though the bag of Cheetos had only been sitting there for a couple of days at most, not sure how long, quote, a fleeting ecosystem had already grown around it. The processed corn, softened by the humidity of the cave, formed the perfect environment to host microbial life and fungi. Cave crickets, mites, spiders, and flies soon organized into a temporary food web, dispersing the nutrients to the surrounding cave and formations. Molds spread higher up the nearby surfaces, fruit, die, and stink. And the cycle continues. There are several signs in the visitor center of the park talking about how finely balanced the ecosystem is and how careful park employees have to be in preserving it and how much work goes into maintaining and cleaning the caves. Cleaning the caves is a huge endeavor, and I was shocked. I knew that it was something they had to do, but I was shocked at exactly how precise and how important, how much care has to be taken with this particular task. The animals that live in Carlsbad Caverns, the bats, the insects, they all thrive on a very delicately balanced food web, a very precisely tuned ecosystem. Any kind of disturbance or introduction of foreign contaminants to this lifestyle can be detrimental. It starts at the bottom and works its way up, and it can overthrow the balance of this fragile world. Some impacts are completely avoidable, said the Park Service. Like a full snack bag dropped off the trail in the big room. To the owner of the snack bag, the impact is likely incidental, but to the ecosystem of the cave, it had a huge impact. Yeah, be careful. A lot of things that can seem innocuous can have big repercussions. You throw a lit cigarette butt out your window, and you burn down half of California, right? It's kind of the general idea. Just be mindful of what you're doing, respect our natural wonders, and keep them looking nice for the next people to come through. And that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. I love Carlsbad Caverns. If you haven't been, you definitely should go sometime. It's an amazing, amazing attraction, and I'm glad that I was able to share a little bit of it with you guys in this video. Big shout out to my channel members here at the Cowboy level. I appreciate everything you do for the channel. If you want to become a member and support me directly, there's a link down below. As the rest of you guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe. I've been Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.